The grand Windsor ballroom glittered beneath. Magnificent crystal chandeliers. As the city's wealthiest, families gathered for the annual Children's Hope Charity Gala. Elegant, guests in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos filled the luxurious hall while a live orchestra played softly in the background. At the center of the room sat Sophia Carter, a beautiful billionaire businesswoman in her early 30s, wearing a breathtaking red evening gown. Beside her was her 8-year-old daughter, Lily Carter, who used a wheelchair after a spinal injury caused by a tragic car accident 3 years earlier. Since that day, Lily had refused to dance, believing she would never experience the joy she once dreamed of. Sophia had spent millions on specialists around the world, but nothing could heal the sadness in her daughter's heart. As the father-daughter dance began, Lily quietly watched, smiling. Families filled the ballroom floor before suddenly noticing a humble man working near the stage. He was Daniel Hayes, a hard-working single dad wearing simple blue mechanic overalls over a white t-shirt. Daniel had been hired by the event company to repair lighting equipment before the gala began and was preparing to leave after finishing his work. Little did anyone know that years earlier, Daniel had served as an elite U.S. Navy SEAL. But after losing his wife, he had left the military to raise his young daughter alone and chose a quiet life away from recognition. Ignoring the whispers of the wealthy guests, Lily gently wheeled herself toward Daniel. The grand ballroom fell strangely quiet as everyone watched the billionaire's disabled daughter stop in front of a mechanic. Looking up at him with hopeful eyes, she softly asked, "Mister, would you dance with me?" Daniel's expression froze for a moment. Across the ballroom, Sophia immediately stood up, her heart racing as she watched the scene unfold, unsure what this stranger was about to do. Daniel looked at Lily for a long moment before, kneeling beside her wheelchair, with a warm smile. "I'd be honored," he said gently. Some guests exchanged uncomfortable glances, believing he would politely refuse because of her disability. Sophia hurried toward them, apologizing softly. "I'm sorry. She doesn't usually ask strangers for anything." Daniel simply smiled and replied, "She's not asking a stranger. She's asking someone who understands courage." Those words caught Sophia by surprise. Daniel carefully locked the wheelchair, then bent down and gently lifted Lily into his strong arms with the confidence of someone trained to protect others. The orchestra quietly changed to a slower melody as he carried her onto the center of the ballroom. Holding her securely, he began moving gracefully across the dance floor. Lily laughed for the first time in years, wrapping her arms around his neck while the guests watched in complete silence. Tears filled Sophia's eyes as she realized her daughter wasn't thinking about her wheelchair anymore. She was simply enjoying the dance she had dreamed of. When the music ended, the ballroom erupted into thunderous applause. One elderly retired admiral standing among the guests suddenly recognized Daniel and whispered in disbelief, "That man isn't just a mechanic. He's Lieutenant Commander Daniel Hayes, one of the most decorated Navy SEAL officers I ever served with." The whisper spread across the ballroom within seconds. Faces filled with shock as everyone looked back at the humble single dad. Sophia stood frozen, unable to believe that the quiet man who had just made her daughter smile again had once been one of the nation's greatest heroes. At that moment, she realized meeting Daniel Hayes was about to change both her daughter's life and her own forever. The applause slowly faded as Daniel gently placed Lily back into her wheelchair. She was still smiling, her cheeks glowing with happiness, and she looked up at him as if she had just experienced the greatest moment of her life. Sophia walked toward Daniel with tears in her eyes. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. Daniel smiled humbly. "You don't have to thank me." She reminded me that courage isn't about standing on 2 feet. It's about refusing to stop, smiling. Before Sophia could respond, the retired admiral stepped forward and saluted Daniel. The ballroom immediately fell silent. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "this man once led rescue missions that saved dozens of lives. Lieutenant Commander Daniel Hayes was one of the finest Navy SEAL officers our country has ever had." Gasps echoed through the room. Moments earlier, many guests had mistaken Daniel for an ordinary mechanic because of his work clothes. Now they realized they had been standing in the presence of a true hero. Sophia looked at Daniel with amazement. Why would someone with your record choose such a simple life? Daniel looked at the photograph of his late wife that he carried in his wallet and answered quietly, "After losing my wife, my little daughter needed a father more than the Navy needed a soldier, so I chose her." His words touched everyone in the ballroom. Even the wealthiest guests lowered their heads in respect. Sophia realized that while she had spent years building a billion-dollar empire, Daniel had been quietly building something even more valuable, a life defined by sacrifice, love, and honor. Looking at Lily's joyful face, Sophia knew that this meeting was not an accident. It was the beginning of a friendship that would change all of their lives forever. 6 months later, the annual Children's Hope Charity Gala returned to the same magnificent ballroom, but this year the atmosphere felt completely different. Through a partnership between Sophia Carter's charitable foundation and Daniel Hayes, hundreds of children with physical disabilities had received advanced medical treatment, therapy, adaptive equipment, and scholarships. Daniel had accepted only one role, not as an executive or celebrity, but as the foundation's volunteer ambassador, visiting families and encouraging children who had lost hope. On the evening of the gala, the orchestra began playing once again as guests gathered around the dance floor. To everyone's surprise, Lily slowly stood from her wheelchair, with the help of lightweight leg braces and a therapist beside her. The room fell completely silent. Looking across the ballroom, she smiled at Daniel and stretched out her hand. "May I have one more dance?" she asked. Fighting back tears, Daniel gently took her hand. Instead of lifting her this time, he walked beside her, matching every careful step she bravely took across the ballroom. Sophia covered her mouth as tears streamed down her face. Doctors had once told her daughter she might never have the confidence to stand in public again, yet here she was, smiling before hundreds of people. As the music ended, the entire ballroom rose to its feet in a thunderous standing ovation. Sophia walked to Daniel, embraced him warmly, and said, "I thought my wealth could solve every problem. Tonight my daughter taught me that kindness, courage, and hope are worth far more than money." Daniel smiled humbly and looked at Lily. She was never defined by her wheelchair. She only needed someone to believe in her until she believed in herself. The applause echoed beneath the crystal chandeliers as Lily proudly stood beside her mother and Daniel, proving that the strongest people are not always the ones who never fall. They are the ones who find the courage to rise again. The end.